how do I make my local branding not sound like ads and advertising and hype? Which is a great question. I was having this discussion earlier this morning, in fact, with a radio station I've been monitoring, a client that every time they talk about anything that's happening in the community, it sounds like they're trying to sell me something and connect with it. And hopefully you got some of the examples that we had there toward the end of the presentation that showed you how you can connect locally by, again, use that infusing word, infusing things that are happening locally into the content you're already doing. A lot of stations I hear sound like they're just going out of their way to gratuitously be local, where they'll talk about a farmer's market and then they'll give all the details of what time they open and what time they close and where they're located. And they don't capture the flavor of it. They don't capture the personality of it. And that's not what being local is all about. Being local is about sounding like you belong here, sounding like that you're just like the listeners are, and that you're immersed in this everyday experience the same way that they are. So my suggestion is, if you want to put it into your branding and your imaging, I would avoid doing things like imaging that says from the top of Mount Soledad to the ocean and all points in between, or just gratuitously mentioning communities. It's fine to put that in imaging, but do it in a way that's clever, that's all about the content and all about the listener experience, not just to try and convince people that you're local. It's different in saying that you're local and actually being local. Next question came in and said, being out at public appearances is a great way to be local, right? We do a lot of remotes, we do a lot of appearances, we do a lot of promotions, and we're out shaking hands all over the place. And my response to that is yes, it's always good to be out in public and to meet your audience. It's a fantastic way to make connections. And that's why politicians go out on tour. They come to where their voters are. So it's great for you to go out to where your listeners are and your potential listeners are, because if you have a personal one-on-one connection and actually shake hands and look somebody in the eye, have a conversation with a person, there's a much greater chance of getting them to listen to you because they feel like they have a relationship and they know you and making that personal connection. So yeah, it's great going out and doing promotions and events, but that doesn't make you local either. What are you going to do when you're there? What kind of impact are you going to make? What kind of an impression are you going to make? All of those are ingredients of being local, but make sure that you're making an impact at those events. And coming up in the next few weeks, especially as more and more stations get back to opening up, and this may be in August or early September, an upcoming seminar on one of our Tuesday morning get-togethers is going to be about how to make a greater impact at your promotions, appearances, and events. I've had a lot of people who have asked about some of those techniques. So that'll be coming up here in the next couple of months. Can you give us some tips on how to turn national or international stories and turning them into local stories? I had a very quick example of that in the presentation about the little girl in Louisville who brought her pet goat to school and how you can localize that. And that's what I mean by, again, infusing your content with local material. That's really, really critical. And you know what? Honestly, it's not that hard to do. It's really not hard to take something that happens somewhere else and make it locally appealing or make it locally interesting. And it's also important to understand, and I mentioned this in the presentation, that being local isn't just about talking about things happening locally. It's about talking about things that people locally are interested in a way that they're interested. Okay, so it's connected. And that's why I spent so much time talking about collecting the resources and gathering data and building a database or some sort of a information and intelligence, a knowledge base of what the community is all about. It really gives a great head start to someone who's coming in from out of town. And speaking of coming in from out of town, one of the questions here is, I am a new jock on a new radio station that's going on the air for the first time. What should I do? How local should I be? And how should I do it? First, number one, I'm going to direct you to a different seminar. If you go on tjohnsonmediagroup.com and do a search for the personality success path, There's an article that explains how new personalities should behave on the air and how you become famous and how you become ingrained in the community that I would highly recommend you read. And then there's a seminar that goes along with it that you can watch on demand. And it takes you through the personality success path and how you can cause listeners to become acquainted with you, to get to know you, how you can go through a growth phase and get them to like and eventually love you, and how you should behave in each of those different steps. So that's the place to start. One thing that I highly recommend, if you are new to a community or you go to a new market, you go someplace different, never been on the air there before, it is not charming to say, I'm from out of town and don't know anything about your city, teach me. It's really not. There are some personalities I've heard that have been able to pull that off. But when you come into, let's say you come into Chicago and you're on in Chicago for the first time and you're originally from Phoenix and you don't know very much about Chicago, coming on the air and saying, hey, I'm from Phoenix and don't know anything about Chicago, so tell me the best place to get a pizza. All it does is send an ad to the audience that you're not like them, that you're a stranger, that you're not from around here. And it's also not charming to come into Chicago from Phoenix and say, you know, I'm a big fan of the Arizona Cardinals. I grew up on the Cardinals and I'm going to have to learn to love these Bears. No, man, you got to be a fan of who the locals are fans of. I had a personality here in San Diego many years ago who had a collection of Major League Baseball hats. And every time we did a video or he did an appearance, he wore a different Major League Baseball hat, except the Padres. He wouldn't wear the Padres hat. Well, why not? Well, everybody here is wearing the Padres hat. I want to stand out. I want to be different. Really? You want to stand out and be different? How about being a fan of the hometown team? So you're cheering for the same people, same teams that your listeners are. It's like coming to a new school. It's like if you were a junior high school kid and you moved to a different city and you started going to a different junior high school. You want to fit in, right? You don't want to come in and show everybody that you're from somewhere else. It's the same thing on the air. So if that's your method, if that's what you've done in the past, or that's what you're thinking about doing, not a good idea. You want to be ingrained in the community as quickly as you possibly can. Question came in about the team of experts. How often do you put the team of experts on the air? There's no hard and fast rule for that. I would say do not schedule them for a regular appearance. You don't want it to be, well, it's the third Thursday of the month, so that means it's lawyer day. We're going to talk to the divorce attorney and find out what's happening in that world. It's not how you use the team of experts. It's a giant resource where you've got an expert for anything that comes up. So if you're in a city and there's a flood and there's a disaster and you need to react to that, instead of scrambling to try and find someone, you've got someone who's in the insurance business and you can talk to them about what these homeowners are going through if they've had damage and what they need to do first in a situation like that, or any situation that comes up. Now, it's intimidating to build that team of experts because as you saw in the categories, and that's only a small sample of all the categories that I recommend. There's a long list of different categories that you want an expert in. Don't go out and try and create the team of experts all at once. Pick out one category at a time and really and truly build a relationship with your experts. So they feel like they're a part of your show, part of your station. And then when you need them, you call them. And if they think of something or if they see something that's happening in the news, I had a show in a market a few months ago when there's a controversy about Prince's estate and what they're going to do with all of Prince's fortune and how that's going to be distributed. And they had an attorney who was personally not able to speak to it. But I said, yeah, I know this attorney. I said, well, why don't you call him and refer them to someone who deals with inheritance and estate planning? And they referred them to that. And they had a great discussion about what families go through and about controversies and fights that happen when there's not a will and everybody comes in trying to get at the money. And the guy told some great stories about things that happened with his clients. And it was very relevant because it was about Prince, but it was local because it was a local a state attorney that was talking about things that happen in that community, which is also a good example of taking something that was happening somewhere else and making it local and making it personal. Question says, why? Hey, this is a great question. I love this. It's, if being local is important, why is syndication and voice tracking booming in radio today? I think most of you can answer that question if you think about it for a few seconds. The answer is, why is voice tracking and syndication so popular? Why is it booming instead of local? It's cheaper. Syndication, I put up some barter and I'm able to get a high quality show. In some cases, actually in many cases, the syndicated content is better. It might be more relevant. It might be more relatable. It might be a bigger staff. It might be funnier. It might be more topical, but it's not more local, folks. It's not more local. And that's why I say that, syndication is a great solution. And I work with a lot of syndicated shows that are highly successful. But the one Achilles heel, the one thing that the syndicated shows can't do is be more personal and more local than your local personalities. And a lot of broadcasters just don't want to spend the money to do local right because there is some cost in that. You can't do a great job with having a highly involved, emotionally connected local show that becomes local celebrities in the market and ask that show to voice track in 3 other markets, do the music log and all the things that personalities are being asked to do now. There's a commitment to becoming that local celebrity in the market. And a lot of stations don't want to pay for it, and they can do it cheaper in other places. But that creates tremendous opportunity for those of you who can really and truly be local. Question says, how can I use hot zips to be more local? If you don't know what hot zips are, it's the zip codes in your area based on ratings, where most of the ratings are coming to contribute to your station. This gets into a fairly deep area of ratings manipulation, ratings programming, and I don't want to go into that today because being local isn't a ratings grab. It's really not. Being local is about building roots in the community and being significant, which has a long-term net positive influence on the ratings. And there's a difference in that. So you're not trying to be local because it's going to get you an extra quarter hour or you're going to bump up 10% in the next ratings period. If you want to use hot zips and do it over a long period of time, don't do it off of one book or two, but you'll look and you'll see where your listeners gather. And you might want to talk about those communities, those neighborhoods, give a little bit more attention to those areas where you're strongest, where most of your ratings are coming from. In other words, know who you serve, know what's going on. That's why, a few years ago on Star 100.7 here in San Diego, we knew that our hot zips were in the north part of the county where the suburban women lived. We were targeting 25 to 34-year-olds, a lot of them young moms, and we knew where they lived. We knew what they were all about. And one of our tactics was to create a local character named Carmel Valley Kim. Carmel Valley was kind of the poster child for the community where a lot of those types of listeners lived, and they were kind of Karen types. And so we created an exaggerated version of those housewives who live in Carmel Valley, and it was hilarious. And we had Carmel Valley Kim call in, always complaining about things. And so we had, but it wasn't the station doing it. It was this caller that was always calling in. And so we had those who were from Carmel Valley and from that area were calling and saying how much they despise her. And we're not like that. I can't believe that she said that. They were angry at Kim, not at the station. And then you had all of the other people from other parts of San Diego County who were calling and saying, yeah, that's exactly what those Carmel Valley people are like. Because there's that attitude so it was very mass appeal by being hyper local. Also had a question here about being hyper local. See if I could find it. I'm putting on a new online station that's targeting hyper local communities. How do I build an audience for it and how do I market it? Find the community newspapers, the Nextdoor sites, the bloggers, anybody that has a local presence, schools, hospitals, coffee shops, anything in that community, and develop relationships with them. Find businesses that service those communities very closely. Put them on the air with you. Do testimonials. In fact, that's one of the things that I ended up putting on the cutting room floor about doing local testimonials. I hear stations in small markets and medium markets all the time that want to sound like they're in a big market. And they will get testimonials that are generic. Oh, it's the best music. I love the morning show. It's upbeat and positive. I just love it. And it doesn't say anything about the community. It doesn't sound like the community. It doesn't sound like the radio station. It's just sharing testimonials that sound good on the air, may sound big market, but it doesn't sound like your local area. The testimonials you want to put on the air and the businesses you want to put on the air, the people you put on the air, you want them to sound like your audience. You want them to sound like everybody else. It's a great way to localize and be local. Love this one. This one came in personally and says, we have a very small staff and this sounds like a lot of work. What do I do? I get it. Being local is a lot of work. So what I would recommend is you start with the steps that I outlined there, build those resources and get help, get everybody involved with it. Have one person who's coordinating it all and build the resources so you can start infusing those things on the radio. Then start branching out, make it a committed long-term project that you're going to build these resources, have meetings about it, go over it in air check meetings. But don't try to do it the way you eat an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One spoonful at a time. You can't jam that whole elephant in your mouth. One spoonful at a time. Same thing with this. Making a commitment to have a local presence starts with taking that first step. If you try to do all of this at once, all of it at the same time, you're going to burn out. And you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get overwhelmed. And you're not going to be able to sustain it for a long period of time. Okay, let's get to some of the other questions that are coming in here through the Q&A. It seems like over the last few years, cell phone quality has gone down the drain with more people driving and using speakerphone mode, and fewer people are calling our morning show these days as younger people actually make fewer phone calls. What suggestions would you have for getting those local listeners on the air with the changes in technology? I'll give you a very quick answer to this, and I'll refer you to another webinar that you can watch on demand, tjohnsonmediagroup.com. It's called Fill Up the Phone Lines. And you are 100% right. You are correct. People are not using the phone as much. Texting is easier. Over many years in radio, listeners have tried to call radio stations, gotten a busy signal or not, nobody's picked up, and they don't have time for that anymore. So they're not calling radio stations as much. But there are a lot of things that we can do to get those voices on the air. And I go over them in great detail in the Fill Up Your Phone Lines seminar on demand. And there's also an ebook that takes you through how you can get the phone lines ringing again, how you can provoke more people calling. Part of it's your content. Part of it's the way that you're asking listeners to participate. Part of it's the way that you invite listeners to call. Part of it is that we assume that listeners know our phone number, or we've given the phone number out so many times that we rush through it and nobody can remember it. Part of it is the hands-free driving law. Part of it is that we are so focused on reading text messages that we're subliminally teaching listeners that we want you to text. If I read text messages and emails on the air, they think that's how I want to be communicated with. And so they do it. They do what we demonstrate. So the best way to get more phone calls is to put more phone calls on. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can use social media. You can use a text line, but instead of reading the text on the air, the good comments that you want to use, text them back and say, hey, I'm going to call you in 5 minutes. Can I record a really quick phone call talking about what you just told me? And that works really, really well. Again, it's a commitment. It's a few more hoops to jump through. It's not that easy. And if you don't have a producer or enough time to do that, it can be a little bit of a challenge. But I guarantee you that it's worthwhile. Oh, another technique to use is plan your content earlier. Start a couple of days in advance and seed it on social media. And as you get good comments on social media asked, hey, can I call you at your convenience? What's a good time I can call you? I'd love to record a conversation with you so I can put it on the air on Thursday morning. And that works really, really well. Plus, you're promoting a topic on social media for a Thursday morning show. Okay, let's keep going through some of the questions here. How do you get local when you're voice tracking from out of market? That's a great question. And it is, again, it's a challenge, especially if you're voice tracking multiple markets. If I were a program, let me back up and answer this and kind of reverse engineer this question. If I'm a program director and I have someone voice tracking on my station, then it's the program director's job to help that personality, that voice tracker, understand the community, understand what's local, and provide the resource so they can be local. All right. So it's, voice tracking is awesome. It's an awesome tool. It's a way to get some talent that you might otherwise not be able to get to come to your market, but it's not an excuse for sounding like you're living somewhere else. There's still a lot that goes into the preparation, the curation, the coaching, the teaching, the air checking, and really understanding that. So it is a chat for the voice tracker now. So this is a question, I believe, from the voice tracker. If you're not getting that from the staff that you work with, demand it. Tell them, hey, I need some more information on your market. I need to know what's happening right now. Encourage them to create that resource that I was talking about. Send them to this webinar and say, it would really help the people that you have on your station and those of us who are voice tracking if you would create this. When I was programming here in San Diego, we created a website that I would update every day with the key talking points for that day. And I'd have a section that was for the contest and promotions that the station was doing with different talking points, with winners from yesterday that you can promote, times that we're doing the contest today, all the things that are up to the minute, up to the now things to talk about on the station. I would have a section that was all the things happening in different communities around the county that day, around the city that day. I would have resources that you could download, some comments the listeners had said the day before, maybe on other shows. We'd have highlights of what other personalities had talked about. So it was like station show prep for each show. And they didn't have to go and coordinate that themselves. I think every station should do that, especially with the technology that we have available today and the tools that are available today. Somebody just needs to take the time and curate that, but it could really help the station sound not only more local, but also more immediate and more timely and more now. Next question. You are suggesting that the team of experts does this for free in return for mentions. Does this have to be logged? I'll leave that question to the individual stations. No, I don't believe it needs to be logged. I don't think it's a commercial for the station. And the team of experts should be doing it as, see it as a benefit. If you find somebody who you want to be on your team of experts and they're saying, hey, you need to pay me for this, then you've got the wrong person. Go on to somebody else who really wants the promotion, wants the visibility, wants the publicity, wants to expand their name, likes talking, likes being on the air, has a good personality, and thinks it would be fun, would like to have to increase their profile in the community. So yeah, you're not looking for just anybody who wants to be your expert. You really need to find someone who fits that criteria, and they're going to want to be it. And especially if they're in a competitive industry, a competitive field. Somebody who is a divorce attorney, for example, does not want to hear someone else who's a divorce attorney, a competitor, being on your team of experts. They want that to be them. And so they should not be asking you to pay them. You're offering them publicity. You're offering them a chance to raise their profile and a chance to be an ingredient to help be a building block of building their business. And it's not a lot of work for them. It's not like you're calling them every Tuesday at 7 o'clock to do a built-in segment. It's just that when something happens and we need somebody on the air that fits your criteria, we'd like to have a relationship where we can put you on the air, and we think this is going to be really good for you as well as really good for us. So it's a lot of give and take. So yeah, you're going to give them mentions. You're not going to hide what business they're in or hide what business they are, and you don't log it because it's really not a commercial. It's a guest appearance. So that's how I would deal with it anyway. Follow-up question. No, this is a repeat, I believe. Is this a once in a while or on a regular schedule? No, you never, ever do the team of experts on a regular schedule, because then you've got to create content to fit when your expert comes on the air. You're building content around a segment, and you want to build a segment around your content. All right. So the team of experts, do they come up with the content, or do you come up with the content? Well, this should never be something where you expect the team of experts to come in with something prepared to entertain you or to educate your audience. It should be something that's in their field of expertise that they can talk about off the top of your head. So for example, let's say maybe you have someone in the medical industry who's on your team of experts. And over the past year and a half, how nice would it be to have a nurse, a healthcare practitioner, a doctor, a head of one of the hospitals that you could call whenever something changed with the coronavirus and with COVID. And you would call whenever there was something relevant or whenever you had a question, and they would be your spokesperson. And the questions you ask them, they're getting asked 100 times a day. They already have it. So they don't have to go out and create any new content for you. They just have to answer questions. It's your job as a personality to create the content and to know what you want to ask and to direct that content. You don't just call them up and say, hey, there's something happening here in the market today. Tell us what you know about it, and expect them to entertain you. That's not what it's for. It's to be a partner. It's to be a co-host. It's to be a resource that can add to your cast of characters that are on the show. Next question. Did the handshakes and high fives team actually hit their goal? Marty and Danielle, no, they didn't do it in 91 days. And we didn't expect them to. We really didn't expect them to hit 91,000 high fives or handshakes in 91 days. That is really extreme, as it was almost impossible to do. And we actually wanted to set them up so they would fail in a way. Not fail miserably, but fall short, because it's self-deprecating. So every day they would fall a little bit further behind, and now it's self-deprecating. We got to make this up. We're going to get in trouble if we don't get there. They didn't do it in the 91 days. They did get there over a longer period of time, which extended the promotion. So great question. Thank you for all the nice comments. I appreciate that. Chuck Taylor says, I got extremely local earlier this month and did my show from a downtown business in a Dallas suburb. That's great. I think as long as there's a good reason to do your show from a business, I think that's fantastic. And with every market starting to open up, that's probably the trigger. And you wanted to find out what was happening in those businesses and talk to people when you're out there. That's great. He said he spent the whole week with local musicians and celebrities on the air. You know, in one of the markets I'm working with right now, we're struggling with one of the shows that I work with that is not very local, and I believe needs to get more local. And the past few days, we've been listening to our competitor, wondering why this show that isn't nearly as good, isn't nearly as entertaining, is doing as well as they are against us. Same format, same type of show, but our show is, frankly, it's much, much better. And we did a side-by-side comparison and started listening. And the reason is they sound like they're from here. They're talking about local musicians. They're talking about the local celebrities. They're talking about places they went yesterday and how good it feels to be out in the community and being able to go places they haven't been able to go and how much they've missed that. It's really, really important. That can be a ratings game changer. John Young says, I have a local sports reporter on at the same time every Tuesday, where we tend to focus on local athletes, teams, human interest topic stories. How can I avoid wearing out this concept? I'll tell you, John, it's a challenge to come up with something different, but you've got to dig deeper to find the stories that are inside the content. Instead of just reporting on those athletes, reporting on the teams, and reporting on the human interest stories that are there, find something that's inside of that. The story is going to come from exploring what's going on in one of those athletes' lives, what it's like to be one of these kids, the high school, and trying to make a decision of where they're going to college. What's the recruiting process like? You're one of the star athletes in our town. What are the colleges saying that are coming to ask you to come there? Are they offering you scholarships? What's that process like? Or maybe they're not getting offers. And wouldn't it be great to know how they're feeling about that, and that anxiety of whether they're going to be able to play at the next level or not? But you're looking for stories inside the topic, because if you just deal with the topic every week, now you're just reporting on the facts, and that's not nearly as good as making that all come alive. And that's kind of what I mentioned in the presentation about the Hometown Heroes. That's kind of what Hometown Heroes is all about, where you're looking for the story that's inside some of these people who are making a difference in the community. Suggestion from Mike, visit the station's Facebook, Twitter, and homepages every day. Yeah, I agree. Especially if the station's Facebook, Twitter, and homepages actually have something on there that's useful and worthwhile. And if it's not, then make it your mission to make sure that content on those platforms changes. Phil says, what about local personalities working on several local and nearby radio stations? I'm not sure what your question is, or if there's a concern there, or if there's an issue there, if you just want to comment on it. I understand the realities of the economy and how stations operate today. And I know that there's a lot of personalities who moonlight. They might do mornings on the Classic Hits station and afternoons on the Top 40 station. I get that. I understand that. I don't love it, to be honest with you, but I think it's okay. There's a problem that starts to develop as that personality becomes better known, because a lot of times the program director on each of those stations wants you to adapt your personality to the format you're on. And I understand that. I understand why you would want that. But as the personality becomes better known, if I happen to hear you on both stations, now I can't trust you because I don't know who you are. And I think that's when it starts to become a problem. I certainly wouldn't want to have a very high profile personality on two very different types of stations where they have to be someone completely different. I would absolutely resist that.